Hello, in this video I'll be demonstrating my Ruby CLI gem, which I've created as part of my course requirements for the Flatiron School's online web development program. For this project I chose to create a program that would scrape this page from Catholic News Agency. The purpose of the gem is to allow a user to first bring up a numbered list of the headlines on that page. They'll then be allowed to select a number from that headline list, which will then bring up the headline again along with a short teaser and the full story's URL. First, we'll execute the file. And here we go. Here's the numbered list. Of course, at the top is a greeting. Welcome to CatholicNewsAgency.com. Here are today's headlines. The user can scroll through those headlines. And below it lists some options. Type the number of a headline for more information. Type headlines to see the list of headlines again. Or type exit to quit. Let's say a person says, I want to see more about number 17. And it brings up a little section here, the headline once more, along with the teaser and the date. Let's say they're interested in the full story. Here's the URL in blue for that full story. It once again presents a list of options. If they want to see that list of headlines again, just type headlines. There's the list. Or if they're not interested anymore, they can just quit by typing exit and get a farewell. Thanks for visiting. Come back tomorrow for more news. My gem is composed of three main classes. Well, fourth if you include the module Catholic News. Of course, that's obligatory, just shows the version. The main working part is the news class, which does most of the scraping here. The story class simply instantiates a story object. Then the CLI class creates the display that the user will see and interact with. If you go to the website here, you'll notice that these headlines are contained in a div with the class Noticia List Contenedor, which, by the way, that's Spanish. Notice list container. And what I wanted to get out of that was the headline itself, which is contained in a div called Noticia List Title, along with the teaser and the date. I'll make sure readers can get those items. So to scrape each of those sections, my news class, of course, creates the instance variable doc, which you see here simply uses Nokogiri to open the web page. We go through for that div with the class Noticia List Contenedor. We iterate over that with an each do statement, and the variable story, which simply creates a new instance of Catholic story. Then we want to get those three main elements, the headline, the teaser, and the link. So say story.headline equals, we use this little variable here, st, short for story, and we search that Noticia List Contenedor div for the div that says Noticia List Title. For the teaser, we have a search for the div with the class Noticia List Body. Then how about that link? If they want the URL for the full story, well, this scrapes searching for a div, Noticia List Title, under, you see, sending elements here. There's an H3 element in bold, and finally the A or anchor tag. And so we don't use text strip for this one, just use adder href. The story class, by the way, was very simple, it turned out. So have the adder accessor headline, teaser, and link. Because those are the three main properties of the story that we're going to need to scrape for. So created a class variable all, which I said is an empty array, and I initialize myself the instance of the object is added into that empty array, and to display or return all, we just have this self.all, a class method. And the CLI class comes into play here. So you first call this method call, simple enough. Instantiate the Catholic news class object, and then allow the user selection method. So you see selection here. The first thing it does is it calls the method list headlines right up here, which puts out the greetings. You'll notice I use the colorized gem just to add a nice little touch of color to the display. But okay, this first iteration you see here, Catholic news story dot all each with index due. This is to create the list, the numbered list of headlines. So back to the story class. Again, the class variable all, that array. And this method here iterates over that array. So it shows the headlines along with a number. Of course, in an array in Ruby, it always starts with 0, not 1. So the I here to create the number for each headline, and to add a 1 each time. Otherwise, we start with a 0 rather than a 1 in the list of headlines. So when the reader is ready to make a selection here, whether they want to see more about one of those headlines, list the headlines again, or exit, that's where the selection method comes in. Say, we'll get the user's input. While that input does not equal exit, here's what it's going to do. Of course, it lists the options I mentioned earlier. If the reader types in headlines, and by the way, I say gets.strip.downcase, say a reader's keyboard is stuck on caps lock or they accidentally put in some capital letters, whereas I have this in all lowercase, let's just go ahead and convert the user's input to downcase. If they do that, once again we run this method, list headlines. And let's show that. So execute the file again. And we have the list of headlines once more. And say the person does want to look at the headlines again, we'll type headlines. And there we go, just like before. But let's say, okay, I'm going to look at that first headline. How do we get that? Well, here's what it's going to do. If their input is greater than 0 and the input is less than or equal to the length of the all array, or from the self.all method found back in the story class, it's going to present, here we have a variable called story info, which we have Catholic News story.all, and you have to do input to integer -1. Again, because in the list headlines method, we had to add 1 here so that our program's going to know what they're talking about. We have to subtract 1. So if the user enters the number 1, the program is going to go back to that all class element array, subtract the 1, getting 0, so it will know, okay, we're going to display that first item in the array there. So we'll say story info.teaser, which if you come down here and look in the actual outputted text, it's this. That's the teaser. Gives the date and a little blurb here regarding what the article is about to make the reader want to, hopefully, investigate the full story. Then to present the URL, now I did have to add in the text www.catholicnewsagency.com, so I discovered that otherwise it was just presenting, if you look down here, this part. But here, I'm going to use string interpolation, storyinfo.link. So remember back in our news class, we had the link. Now I want to be sure that a user, if they put in some kind of invalid input, that wouldn't create any problems. But let's say a reader, first of all, puts in more than the amount of stories in the array. I did a count at first and found that on the page they consistently displayed 20 news headlines. And again, if you bring up that list of headlines, you're always going to see that it goes to 20. But I didn't want to count on that always being the case. I had no idea what the website will end up doing. So let's say they start showing more than 20 headlines on that one page, or fewer than 20. In this area here, by the way, I'd originally put if the user's input to integer is greater than 0 or less than or equal to 20, but then I thought, no, I want to be sure their input matches up to the length of the stories in the all array. Let's say a person puts in, say, oh, I want to read story 22. They're going to get a message here that just says invalid entry. Then it lists the options one more time. Versus, oh yeah, there were only, I think, 20 items to view, so let's look at 15. Oh, there we go. Headline again, the teaser, finally the URL. Let's say they accidentally type in some kind of other invalid data, like they type in a letter instead of a number. They're going to get the same thing, invalid entry. That's what I had here at the end of my if-else block of code. If they don't put in some kind of valid input, whether headlines, a valid number, or the word exit, it's always going to output invalid entry along with a list of options again. And if a person does type in exit, it's going to head over to the finish method down here at the bottom of our CLI class. It'll just say, thanks for visiting, check back tomorrow for more news. And say, okay, I'm done for the day, exit, and there we go. For our required files, the Catholic News Ruby file here, I made sure it required OpenURI, require Nokogiri. And for the colorized gem, colorize string. Then I needed it to require these relative files: version, CLI, news, and story. And of course, the module information right here, tacked on at the very end. For the gem spec file, not a lot to do there. A lot of this was automated. Let's make sure it required Catholic News / version. Found when I didn't have that, I kept getting error messages when I tried to test the code. And this block of information here, I just had to fill it in myself. One with here a summary, description, home page, license. And again, as I started to do this project, I was very pleased to find that much of this was already included, like the license as in template MIT license, for example. I did need to add some dependencies here, like bundler, rake. I also added in colorize. And I uploaded everything to GitHub, my README file, some of which again was the text was automatically added in when I created this. Of course, we have our bin folder. This one, Catholic-news, in the bin folder. That's the executable file. See, it calls on the CLI class. And these console and setup files were automatically included when I first created the gem. So overall, pretty simple project here. Once I got the hang of it, it's a bit challenging. I tried various methods here. Initially, my working news scraper looked more like this. This is something I created in Notepad++ as I was just trying things out. I originally did not have a story method. I used all of this. So you had methods for getting the teaser, the links, and the headlines. And it worked very well, actually. Had instance variable teasers, links, and headlines. What I would simply do was use the collect method to create arrays of each one. I found it did exactly what I wanted the gem to do. However, my advisor at Flatiron School kept saying, it's good, but you really need to follow those Ruby object-oriented design patterns. She kept recommending having an article or story class that would instantiate an article or story object. So I wasn't too happy about having to keep reworking the code, but finally I was able to create a story object that interacted well with my news and CLI classes. So just one more time, execute the file, view the headlines, pick one you want, you can see the headline again along with the teaser, and then finally the URL if you'd like to see the full story. See the headlines again. Get an error message if you put invalid input, invalid entry. Here are the options. Say, okay, I'm done. Exit. And that is my Catholic News Ruby CLI Gem Project web scraper.